Thank you so much for listening to AJFF In Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. My co-host Sarah and I, like everyone at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, are so grateful for your support. Whether you subscribed in your podcast app or are leaving us ratings and reviews, every little bit helps. What perhaps helps more than anything, though, is your financial support. We cannot do the podcast or any of our other virtual programs without the generous contributions of listeners like you. If you're willing and if you're able, please consider supporting the podcast with a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. Thank you so much, and now, please enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Brad Pilcher, and this is AJFF In Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. The 21st annual festival is right around the corner, and we've been working very hard to prepare for it. This year, because of a little thing called COVID-19, it is going to be coming to a home theater near you. That makes things a little different from years past, but one of the things that hasn't changed this year is the quality of the films. They will still be world-class. They will still be the caliber that everyone has grown to love and expect from the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. They will be from a diversity of genres and countries. They will cover all manner of themes and topics. They will be absolutely delightful. And there's a lot of them, which is also the case every year at the festival. So we need to figure out how to pick the films we want to see. And we're sure that's true of everyone listening as well. To help us with that, I am joined by two very special guests. I am usually on the receiving end of questions about which films I recommend, and I'm going to be extremely happy today to turn into a listener and just sit back and listen to two incredible minds in the world of film. Matthew Bernstein, who is the chair of the Department of Film and Media at Emory University, and Hazel Gold, an associate professor of Spanish at Emory University. They are our selection committee co-chairs. They have been involved with the festival for years, and they have watched many, if not all, of the films that will be at the festival this year. So they will be giving you their picks. They will be giving me their picks, and so I won't be giving any picks whatsoever, which for me is a wonderful change of pace. And with that, I want to kick it off by asking Hazel first, what is your first recommended film for the 2021 AJFF?
Thanks, Brad. Hi to you and to Matthew Bernstein. And my first pick is Adventures of a Mathematician. And the reason this is one of my picks is because this deals with a subject that we have never previously seen explored in a film presented by the AJFF. The role of Jewish, in this case, mainly European immigrant physicists, mathematicians, and chemists in the Manhattan Project, which was charged with developing the first atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan and brought World War II to an end. I think viewers may be familiar with the story of Robert Oppenheimer, one of the key architects of the Manhattan Project, but very few people know the stories of others who participated in these efforts, and that includes Hungarian Jewish immigrants like Leo Szilard and Edward Teller and Johnny von Neumann, and at the center of this film, Stanislaw Ulam. Ulam was a Polish Jew who studied at Harvard and was invited by his friend von Neumann, who he had met earlier in Warsaw, to come and study at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, where he had the opportunity to hear Albert Einstein. And subsequently, he was recruited to join the Manhattan Project out in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And Ulam is tremendously important because not only did he contribute to solving problems regarding the design of the hydrogen bomb, which is the basis of all of our thermonuclear weapons, his methods of complex computational calculation using computers places him as one of the pioneers of our current digital age. So in a sense, this is a film that shows how the 1940s gave birth to two devices that changed our world, the atom bomb and the computer. And this film is based on Ulam's own memoir, published subsequently, called Adventures of a Mathematician, as well as the interviews that the director Thor Klein conducted with Ulam's daughter, Claire, and his nephew, Alex, who happens to be the family archivist. And if you ask me what makes this film so compelling, I think it's the way that the director has told the story of Stan Ulam on two levels that ultimately converge: his role as a player in world historical events and his personal story as a young immigrant, husband, and father. We see the human dimensions of his experiences as well as his professional life, although I would point out viewers don't need to be scared off. There is not a lot of technical jargon that would be unfamiliar that's used in the film. This is a film that, of course, alludes to the Holocaust, in part because other than his younger brother, the rest of Ulam's family stayed back in Poland and were trapped there. And it explains why so many Jewish scientists and mathematicians like Ulam were so motivated to see the United States be the first country to build the bomb that would help defeat the Nazi regime and bring the war to a conclusion. But the film goes beyond that. We see how Ulam becomes very troubled by the destructive capabilities of the atom bomb and later the hydrogen bomb. So the moral calculus, the ethical questions that Ulam and his colleagues debate aren't simply Jewish questions. These are questions that confront all of humanity. And I would add, these are considerations I heard discussed in my own family when I was a kid, because my father was hired right out of college to join the unit of the Manhattan Project that was housed at Columbia University in New York. And he often spoke to me and my brother about his own, we could call them adventures of a chemist, and about the moral arguments pro and con regarding the development and the use of the atom bomb. And I would just conclude by saying, besides drawing these very compelling biographical portraits, the director and the set designers of Adventures of a Mathematician paid very careful attention to recreating in great detail the ambiance of the 1940s and life in the isolated Los Alamos residential and laboratory compound. So you see the clothing, the cars, the home decor, the music, all of that has been very carefully recreated. And then I think viewers will appreciate how this film presents some very striking parallels to present day issues. One is the question of immigration, not just the flight of refugees escaping persecution and seeking safe harbor in the US, or the tragic separation of families that often results, but also it's a reminder of the amazing contributions that these immigrants make to their host societies. And the other issue is the threat of nuclear destruction, which since the dropping of the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki has loomed over our entire planet ever since. We know that in the 1960s, the confrontation of the US and the Soviet Union over the Cuban Missile Crisis brought us to the brink of potential nuclear war and mass annihilation. And today we hear of Iran's plan to enrich their stores of uranium. So this is a film that speaks to us across the decades, national borders, to address issues of tremendous weight, and it does so in a way that is both entertaining and thought-provoking. And that's why I picked this film.
Wow, Hazel, it sounds terrific. It sounds like one of those documentaries that we see at the AJFF that I put under the category of who knew, right? Who knew about these Jewish people in history and their innovations and their contributions. It sounds very uplifting as well as enlightening.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you picked this one too. As a history nerd and as a bit of a science nerd, this was right up my alley, and I will say it paid off on all of those levels, just as you describe it. It is timely. It is the period piece elements are perfect. Really a wonderful pick for the festival, and one that I'm excited to share with some friends and family. Matthew, what's your first pick?
Well, before I get into that, I also want to say, Hazel, I had no idea your father did that work. What an amazing connection to have to the material.
You're absolutely right, Matthew. I heard the story from him about what happened in the lab. He was hired again as, a new college graduate beginning his PhD in chemistry. He didn't know what he was being hired for, except that he was with a group that was supposed to be devising a membrane to separate larger from smaller molecules. And a lab accident and an explosion down the hall, and they all found out that this was a membrane to try and separate the isotopes U-235 from U-238 to make enough uranium to be able to do the core of the atom bomb. So how's that for relevance?
Incredible. It also sounds like a movie like The Ritchie Boys. You have this story of immigrants from Germany or Eastern Europe to America who turn around and help in the war effort. It's a very satisfying narrative, and all the more powerful because it was true. So my main pick, my first pick, and I would say my highest ranked pick, is the Israeli drama Asia. This is an intimate portrait of a 35-year-old nurse and single mom named Asia, and her 17-year-old daughter Vika, short for Victoria. Vika is diagnosed with a degenerative disorder that affects her breathing and her motor skills. And the film charts how their relationship develops during the course of this ordeal. And they live in Jerusalem. One of the great pleasures of the AJFF is the chance to discover not only new films, but new talent. And Asia is the first feature film from Israeli writer-director Ruthie Prebar. And a relative newcomer, Elena Yiv, plays Asia, and Shira Haas, Unorthodox, plays the daughter. And all of them are outstanding. As the director Prebar has said, this is a film about women told from a women's point of view. It is almost entirely a female crew behind the camera. And it's worth noting that the film won 3 awards at the Tribeca Online Festival last spring, Haas for Best Actress and also for Cinematography, and Prebar for Director. And it dominated the Israeli Ophir Awards. It got 9 wins, including Best Film, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Best Cinematography by Daniela Nowitz, the first female cinematographer to win an Ophir. It won an award for casting. Music, the composer Carney Postel is the first woman to receive an Ophir for music. Art direction, editing, makeup director, and it was nominated for more. So this is going to be Israel's official submission to the Academy Awards, and I think there's grounds for hope it will make it to the shortlist. So the film Asia charts a course in which a harried mom and an adolescent daughter treat each other very warily, to begin with, as a standard. Yet the film shows in a variety of ways that even as they stay out of each other's lanes at the beginning, they have a great deal in common, particularly how they spend their leisure time with men and getting high or drunk, unbeknownst to the others. And they're both very lonely, and each in their own way. And one of the great strengths of this film is its restraint. It shows us what is happening to them and their relationship, and it allows us to observe it. The other great strength is in the characterizations. There is no self-pity, especially from Vika, about her deteriorating health. She's very hard-nosed. And something else I admire about this film is it's incredibly intimate. It's full of 2 shots of mother and daughter talking to each other, or the mom talking with other people, or the daughter talking with this other nurse in the hospital where the mom works, Gabby, as he talks to the mom and he talks to Vika as he helps out with Vika's care. You really get these long takes in which you get to see how these characters respond to each other. And that's also a tribute to the work of cinematographer Daniela Nowitz. And Carney Postel created a very melancholy score for the film. And it's a movie about sacrifice and love, even when we cannot fully help one another. And that's one reason the film is called Asia, not Vika. The film is actually based in the director's observation of her mother's care for her dying sister. Now, I know folks have been through a lot this year, and we all welcome opportunities to laugh. So I want to say that Asia has some humorous moments, and they are very well earned. But most of all, Asia is a masterclass in building drama and delineating the relationships between a parent and a child. And the ending is incredibly moving and powerful. You really should not miss it. So that is my top choice and first choice, Asia.
I mean, you got to say something for Shira Haas, and the rest of us may have had just a difficult year, to put it mildly, but she's had a banner year, and it is my deep hope that between Unorthodox and this film, that American audiences start to see more of her just fantastic performance.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And something else about Shira Haas, and you could see this in Orthodox, but it's also true of Elena Yiv, who plays the mom, Asia. They almost look different in every scene. They have faces, not only do they physically resemble each other, which helps with the story, but in a different kind of lighting or a different kind of clothing or a different scene. Their faces are these shifting landscapes. They're just fascinating to watch. So it's not just a masterclass in direction, it's a masterclass in acting, as a, kind of boiled down to two characters, what's sometimes called a two-hander.
And I would jump in and say, for people who know Shira Haas from her work in Unorthodox, you might think there's no way, right, that anyone will outshine her or maybe even equal her performance in this film. And so I have to 100% agree with your characterization of Elena Yiv as her mother, because that is equally as strongly delineated a portrait of a mom who is fierce in her love, who is dealing with so many other difficulties, including on her job, where she cares for others, and then she comes home and has to continue the caregiving for her own very ill daughter. They are two riveting performances. You can't not watch this film, frankly.
Hazel, do you have a recommendation for another can't miss riveting watch at the festival?
Yes, and I would do a little bit of a change up on the tone here. My next pick is the documentary Breaking Bread, directed by Beth Elise Hawke, that's based on a topic that is perennially popular with AJFF audiences, food. And this is a film that centers on the first Arab food festival in Israel, which was conceived and brought to fruition by Dr. Nof Atamna Ismail. And Nof describes herself at the film's outset as a woman of multiple identities. She's a scientist, a cook, an Israeli, a Palestinian Arab, and, not coincidentally, she's the first Arab to win the top prize on the TV show Israel Master Chef. The thrust of this documentary can be summed up by the quote by the late chef Anthony Bourdain: "Food may not be the answer to the world peace, but it's a start." And what we hear from Nof and from other festival participants is how food offers a way to build bridges between Arabs and Jews living together in Israel. Nof herself argues that living in the middle, as she does, straddling the lines between ethnic and religious communities, is actually the best place to be. She says people like food are better than when there are many different colors and diverse varieties, because this is something that enlarges our mutual understanding. And the festival that's profiled in this documentary takes place in Haifa, which itself is a multicultural city that is not embroiled in the same kind of sectarian politics that often trouble cities like Jerusalem. And as we see, there are 35 restaurants in Haifa that host the festival, and at each one, an Israeli chef and an Arab chef and a Jewish chef are paired and have to work together. And the chefs are collectively charged with recreating something special, traditional dishes that have deep meaning for Arabic history and culture, but have been nearly forgotten today and are in danger of being lost. And along the way, we meet several pairs of these chefs, and I'll just mention two examples. For instance, we meet Shlomi Meir, whose family has owned a restaurant for 62 years, specializing in Polish Ashkenazi food. And he works shoulder to shoulder with Ali Khatib, whose family hails from Syria. And he was brought up in Gajar village, which is an entirely Muslim community, which since the year 2000 has been split right down the middle. One half is in Israeli territory, and the other half is in Lebanon. And Ali wants to resurrect a recipe that his grandmother used to prepare, and Shlomi, whose mother, interestingly, has Egyptian roots, is eager to help him. And we also see this multicultural mix in Osama, a Palestinian chef from the Israeli city of Akko, and his partner Ilan from Haifa, whose father is French Catholic, his mother is an Italian Jew from Livorno, and he has a Muslim godfather. And we also get to know married chefs Shoshi and Fadi Karaman. She's Jewish, he's a Muslim. This film makes the point that in Israel, among other places, food can serve two principal functions. It can be an instrument for social change, because as one chef says, there's no room for politics in the kitchen. The chefs are a living example of cooperation and bringing about changes, one person, or in this case, two people at a time. The participants all agree that food knows no geographical borders. Political terror may be promoted by the existence of borders, but terroir knows no frontiers. And for this reason, it was decided to name this the Asham Festival, that is, the food festival of the Levant, the Mediterranean region that encompasses Israel, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. And equally important, the film points out that this cuisine is part of a larger culinary and cultural heritage that really deserves to be preserved. So, summing up, Breaking Bread is a terrific film with a genuinely positive message about coexistence between Arabs and Jews living together in Israel. And I would point out that the cinematography serves up stunning images of the ingredients and the dishes prepared for the festival. Really, this is gastroporn of the highest level. And my recommendation is to watch this film regardless of whether you do so before, during, or after dinner.
Well, now I'm hungry.
Yes. It's sounds like we need to order in some food before we sit down with this one.
Well, Matthew, what's your next pick?
I'm going to change the tone also and talk about a comedy. This is the film Shiva Baby. And it's also like Asia, from a first-time female feature director, American Jewish, Emma Seligman. She developed this feature from a short she made 2 years ago of the same name. The only readily recognizable cast member is Fred Malamed, who appeared as Cy Abelman in the Coen brothers classic, A Serious Man. And here, Malamed plays the affable and overly talkative father of the main character, Danielle. And I'll mention, the film hasn't been released widely, but it so far has a 97% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So Shiva Baby is about Danielle, who's played by a completely convincing actor named Rachel Sennott. Danielle's an NYU student who seems to be majoring in gender studies, but we're always not sure exactly what she's doing. And the title, Shiva Baby, comes from the fact that this film almost takes place entirely at a Shiva call. A friend of Danielle's parents has died. She meets her parents outside the home, and she doesn't know who has died. And so in the course of the film, this Shiva Call is an ongoing ordeal for Danielle, partly because her over-talking, oversharing parents tell everyone in the house what Danielle has been doing, what she hopes to be doing, trying to make up for the fact that Danielle has no career plans and hasn't graduated yet. And Danielle is not a likable character per se, at least not initially. She's self-absorbed, she's self-pitying, she's constantly lying about what she's doing. She's a babysitter, maybe she might go to law school. She has to explain over and over again, and over her constantly talking parents, that gender studies is a lens with which to view the world. It's not a preparation for a specific job. So Danielle is a prisoner at the Shiva Call. She has to navigate not only between the presence of her parents, who are constantly calling her over, talking about her behind her back and so on, but also between the presence of a lover and a childhood friend who is going to law school, and all the gossipers in the family and friend circle who want to talk about her, comment on her apparently dramatic weight loss, and her parents who keep introducing her, trying to get her a job. Danielle gets a bleeding wound on her knee. She loses her iPhone with a sexting photo unlocked. She gets coffee spilled all over her, and she can't stop staring at her lover, who arrives unexpectedly. Now, what amazed me in Shiva Baby was the incredible choreography of encounters, looks, and action. Emma Seligman, working with her cinematographer Maria Rusch, uses the widescreen frame and selective focus to create an even greater sense of claustrophobia than a crowded house full of Jewish friends and family provides. And the film is not particularly profound, I would say, though it does bring up these ideas of what it means to be a Jewish American, to belong to the Jewish community, and how to define oneself in relation to and possibly opposition to it. But so I found the film an utterly brilliant comedy, but there are two caveats I feel people should know about. First, the film mercilessly satirizes American Jews, especially New York Jews. There are stereotypes and cliches in the characterizations, but they're so finely etched and so effectively brought to life by this cast of actors that I really didn't mind. And I say this as a native New Yorker. I've been in places like this. I've been in situations like this. Secondly, Shiva Baby is what we call cringe comedy at its best. Barely 10 seconds go by in which Danielle is not humiliated, embarrassed, feeling awkward, or determinedly fighting off feelings of self-loathing. At the same time, she is a very determined individualist who finds strength and power within herself in the course of the Shiva gathering. But if cringe-worthy comedy is not your thing, you're not going to enjoy it. I can best describe Shiva Baby this way. Maybe you remember that immortal party scene in The Graduate, the college graduation party that Benjamin's parents throw for him in their house with all their friends. This is the great scene where a family friend memorably tells Benjamin by the family bull, plastics, think about it. If you go back and look at that scene, Benjamin spends its entirety, which is about 3 or 4 minutes, trying to escape his parents and his parents' friends. But one of them always pulls him back into frame. He tries to go out to see his new Lamborghini. There's a friend when he opens the door. He tries to go out back to his room, but parents' friends talk to him. His only retreat is finally getting up to his bedroom, where Mrs. Robinson finds him and asks him for a ride home. Now, imagine if that party scene in The Graduate was extended into a feature comedy. If you can imagine that, then you have a very good sense of Shiva Baby. It is inventive, it's polished, it's full of laughs and intriguing characterizations of Danielle and her childhood friend, rival Maya, who is going to law school. So I couldn't take my eyes off it, and I think you would really, really enjoy it.
I watched this for the first time actually at Toronto, and I remember watching it, enjoying it. I was skeptical. I read the synopsis. I was like, a Shiva call. It's a comedy. And I was confused the whole time, not because the film isn't good. The film's great, but I was like, I've seen this before. I've seen this before. And then it wasn't until after the film was finished that it clicked that I remembered that this was originally a short film that she made a couple of years ago that we also watched when we were going through films for the festival. And I had just forgotten that she had done that. And then she's taken it and adapted it into a feature-length film, which is phenomenal. And I think you're right on the money, Matthew. If you could imagine, I mean, it started life as a short film as kind of a concept that probably most people think of as something that couldn't sustain a feature film, but she manages to sustain a feature film phenomenally. And this is her first feature film. The director, it's a real accomplishment.
So yeah, again, the pleasure of discovering new talent, and that applies not just to the writer director, but also to many of the cast. I mean, the actor playing Danielle is not someone very well known, so it's really terrific. And I have to add that the musical score is very percussive and it's very amusing. It just kind of adds to the feeling of absurdity that informs the film.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Hazel, I will turn back to you and ask you, what is your next pick?
Okay, thank you, Brad. And I'm going to admit that I kind of cheated a little bit. I found it really difficult to limit myself to one final pick. So I'm going to briefly give you two recommendations for my final picks. One of them is I admired tremendously director Eitan Fox's film Sublet. And I really warmed to the story of this 50-something gay travel writer from New York. He works for the New York Times, who subleases an apartment while on assignment in Tel Aviv from a young film student. And through a complicated series of miscommunications, the student is still there when Michael arrives. And the student says, I'll go out to a hotel while you're here. And he says, no, don't do that. So they end up spending the next 5 days while Michael is on assignment together. The American, Michael, came of age during the AIDS crisis. He has suffered a deep loss, and he's a very introspective, introverted, and well-organized individual. And he's not on the same page as his husband, who wants them to become parents. Michael is not at all convinced that he would be a good father or that they should have a child. Tomer, the young Israeli with whom he is sharing the apartment over the course of these 5 days, is quite the opposite. He's extroverted, spontaneous, and he's very much more open about his sexuality. This is a different generation. And the story of their developing emotional relationship, as unexpected as it is profoundly life-changing for both of them, unfolds in 5 chapters corresponding to the 5 days that Michael has planned to research the city, and Tomer acts as his tour guide. And I have to say, along the way, the director, Eitan Fox, whose work we know well at the festival, incorporates the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian divide and Michael's ambivalence towards his own Jewishness. He hasn't been back to Israel since his bar mitzvah. And also the challenges of being an alternative artist in Israel. And the film also gives us a really terrific insider's view of Tel Aviv as an exciting cosmopolitan city, really pulsing with life. But the analysis, very deeply etched, even visually, the many close-ups as you see the emotions flitting across Michael's and Tomer's face. When we see what happens when these two men's lives intersect, that's what truly makes this, I think, a film to watch. And my other pick, I couldn't choose, so I had to include them both, is Keith Thomas's film, The Vigil, which is this year's representative in the AJFF of the Jewish horror genre. This is a supernatural thriller that takes place during one single evening in Brooklyn's Hasidic Borough Park neighborhood. The protagonist, Yaakov, has recently left his Orthodox community, and he's learning to live in the outside world. But he can't find a job, and he's low on funds. And so with some reluctance, he accepts the offer from his former rabbi to serve as an overnight shomer, a watcher, fulfilling the Jewish ritual practice of having someone watch over the body of a deceased Jew until it's buried. And he arrives at the rundown house of the decedent, and it is there that Yaakov meets the widow, Mrs. Litvak, and he begins to realize over the course of the time he spends in the house, something very wrong is going on, something not just creepy, but dangerous. The film was shot entirely on location, was very respectful of the Hasidic community who came out to watch the filming and were very interested. And it also involves research that Keith Thomas, the director, did into esoteric Jewish beliefs in demonology. The atmosphere in which the film is staged is suitably dark, decrepit, claustrophobic. The soundtrack is very brooding, and the cast is superlative, and it includes Dave Davis as the increasingly anxious Yaakov, Menashe Lustig, who is an insider himself in the Orthodox community, but also an actor. He plays the rabbi. And Lynn Cohen, famous for her work in the theater and in film and on TV. Some of you may remember her work as the nanny to Miranda in Sex and the City. And this was her final screen performance before her death. This is a fantastically effective horror film. It's not bloody. It's not gory. It's not imbued with discussions of the golem, which is often what we see in Jewish horror films. I think it is really worth watching if this is a genre that you enjoy, but I would warn viewers, don't watch it alone.
I should stress that the visual has a very special place in this year's festival, in addition to being available to watch in your home in the same way that the majority of the films are available. We're also going to be doing a midnight movie screening of it with a little pre-show and a wonderful kind of live stream at midnight on a Saturday night that I am looking forward to, because we've never done anything like that at the festival before. But we thought, with this film in a weird year with a virtual hybrid festival, why not give it a shot? So that one I'm really looking forward to sharing with friends in that way at midnight during the festival. Matthew, there is one more pick, and it is yours. So what is your final pick for the festival?
Yes. Well, I'm going to cheat a little like Hazel and mention two. I'll talk about one at length and another one more briefly. So my third pick is a film called Here We Are, Israeli film. Again, this is a film that scored well at the Ophir Awards. It won Best Actor, Best Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor, and Best Director for Nir Bergman, who's famous as the director of Broken Wings and perhaps more widely known as the creator of In Therapy, the Israeli TV series that was the basis for the HBO series In Treatment. And it too was nominated for Best Picture. So with Here We Are, it's very like Asia, actually. It's an intimate portrait of a parent-child relationship, but here it's a father and a son. The father, Aaron, played by Shai Avivi, who won Best Actor at the Ophirs. He's focused on taking care of his autistic son, Yuri, who's played by Noam Imber. And as Yuri is in his 20s, he's at an age where the parents have decided, more the mom than the dad, and they're estranged, they're divorced. They've decided, the mom has, that Yuri really needs to learn independently in a group home for autistic folks. And it's urged by her, and it's demanded by court order. But because Yuri lives with his father, Aaron, Aharon, neither of them want to separate. And the film is about how they scheme to avoid this commitment. The film begins with a view from a train riding along the Israeli coast, and we learn this is a routine that father and son do. They go to a train station, and then they ride back. And Yuri especially likes to watch on his small video screen Charlie Chaplin's classic, The Kid, a dramatic comedy about a tramp played by Chaplin and the orphan boy he takes under his wing. It's a very apt choice for this film. And so we learn as the film progresses that Yuri and Aaron have developed a series of routines like the train ride, eating star-shaped pasta for dinner or lunch, or maybe even breakfast, and turning out the lights, the light in the room, the light on the aquarium. And from there, we learn about their impending separation. One of the virtues of his film is its slow but steady revelation of details in Aharon's life, his backstory, and how he wound up devoting all his time and energy to Yuri's care. As in Asia, it's an intimate film that solicits our close observation. There are a lot of long takes where we get to see the characters and appreciate the actors. There are painful scenes in which Yuri breaks down and cannot do anything, and we watch as Aaron often inventively gets Yuri to do what needs to be done. For example, there's a point where they have to enter a bank office, or maybe it's a travel office, and Yuri is put off by the automatic sliding doors and fears he'll get caught in them and hurt. So his father, who's actually an artist, draws a button on the wall outside and tells him to push the drawn button, stand in front of the doors, and Yuri's able to go in. And the title, Here We Are, comes from something Yuri says, because Yuri and Aaron traverse Israel in their wanderings and avoiding getting Yuri to the group home. And here we are is a question the film is always asking. It's not just about parents sacrificing for their kids, but as they progress in their efforts to avoid the home, they meet an array of friends and family who provide perspective on their situation. And Here We Are is also a film about where do we belong. As the film progresses, Aaron plots more outlandish schemes to save Yuri from the group home. But as the film progresses also, we begin to wonder who dreads their separation more. Is it Yuri, the autistic son, or Aharon, the father? So Here We Are is another just terrific drama with moments of lightness and humor, but also great insight. So I recommend that. And then my kind of also mention would be the comedy Honeymoon, which comes to us from the writer and director Talia Lavi, who we all know for her feature debut, Zero Motivation. And this Honeymoon is just kind of a crazy comedy. And I can't put it up at the level of achievement as Zero Motivation, but it's a bride and a groom who have just come out of their ceremony and their reception and their party, and they arrive at their lavish honeymoon suite. But then all kinds of problems ensue that prevent them from actually enjoying their honeymoon night. I mean, they wind up wandering all over the city at the bride Eleanor's insistence. And, it gets more and more absurd. It has a fantasy dance sequence with members of the Secret Service. Eleanor is this kind of outlandish, adventurous woman, and she's married to her more conventional husband. The actors are all terrific, particularly the central couple. So I do recommend this film. It's really terrific. It's certainly worth seeing.
We have really good comedies this year, which I'm very happy about. Honeymoon is definitely up there. It's one of the really good ones.
You know, we don't always have a lot of comedies, so it's always great to see.
Yeah, it's a real nice plus. And certainly I think we've earned it after 2020. Matthew and Hazel, thank you so much again for joining me and for sharing your picks for the festival. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Great to be together.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Matthew. See you all at the movies.
Yes.
Absolutely. As always, I am Brad Pilcher. Producing and editing the show is our technical director, Chris Holland. My co-host is Sarah Glassberg. The music you've been hearing throughout this episode is by the incredibly talented Joe Alterman. Please look him up wherever you get your music. And find more from us, as well as show notes at ajff.org/inconversation. Our email address is inconversation@ajff.org. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice or check our YouTube channel for new episodes. Give us a rating, give us a review. It all helps. But what helps perhaps more than anything is your financial support. We cannot continue to do the podcast or really any of our digital programs without the ongoing support of listeners like you. If you're willing and if you're able, please make a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. And don't forget to tell your friends about the show. And don't forget to come to the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, even if you never leave your house to do it. Until next time, goodbye.